Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmus und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Behar. Sunday, Mr. Hashem, is Lag Boimer. So what's the connection between Parshas Behar, Lag Boimer, and this week's Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is Perik Dalet. Before we start, we'll start with tzedakah, as we've done the last couple of months. Gedelet tzedakah shemakarev segula. Mashiach should come now, and the war should end, and should be toiva nirav nigla for ganz Klal Yisrael, chol bnei Yisrael, bechol mokim shehem. We'll say a prayer because Lag BaOmer is one of the main things about Lag BaOmer is it teaches us the awesomeness of the level of a tzaddik. And the chiddush is that in Nigla Torah, in Gemara, and in Maimonides Azal, that it speaks about Reb Shimon bar Yochai, and the praises it gives about Reb Shimon bar Yochai, that are so unparalleled, and beyond anything we can even understand, tells us how great a tzaddik is. And from this, it tells us about all great tzaddikim. So we'll say a prayer, even though the Pashto Pshat, obviously, in tzaddik, sometimes tzaddik can mean just righteous. According to the Gemara, a chassid is higher than a tzaddik, because a chassid does the fnimish or sadin, goes beyond the letter of the law, and a tzaddik is just a person who's righteous, he follows the law. But in any case, we'll say the bracha of Allah tzaddikim, the Allah chassidim, I'll play it as Beis Ephraim, Valgeri HaTzadik V'Aleinu Yemna Rachmecha Hashem Elokeinu V'sein Sochotei L'chal Beitchem Shimcha B'Emes V'simchlekeinu Yimoyim L'Leilam L'Loi Nevish Ki V'chol B'Tachnu Baruch Atah Hashem Mishanu Miftach L'Tzadikim. We say a prayer, we thank Hashem who always supports and gives security to the righteous. And we said Ala Tzadikim V'Ala Chasidim, so it's a prayer for all Tzadikim and all Chasidim. V'Amich Kulam Tzadikim. So Hashem, Am Yisrael, is on your side. We're the ones that are fighting the good fight, spreading the good word, spreading light to the world. So please, we should see that all those that follow in your ways have a life which is secure, solid, and flourishing. Okay, this week's Parsha is Parshas Behar. You know, there's so much to talk about, Bechlal, every single week. And I always try to think, what would the Eibishter want me to speak about? And I think the subject, which is the most important subject, always is Avas Yisrael. And especially that Reb Shimon bar Yochai was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva said, V'afta l'reacha kamoicha, is Zak Klal Gadol b'Torah. And the whole weeks of Sfiras HaEmes is that we'll work on our character traits to improve, as we spoke last week. So therefore the focus, in any case, and especially these days, is on Avos Yisrael. So in Parshas Behar, we're going to see two examples of Avos Yisrael. And my point, because these shiurim, my objective is to show always the beauty and the profundity of Chassidus. And Chassidus sheds light on the fundamentals of Yiddishkeit and puts it in a whole different level. So the principles to remember, the concept, and I've mentioned this many times before, is there's three levels. In general, your whole life will change when you think about these three levels. There's selfish, that's Sholosh Klipas Hatmeis. There's self, which is Klipas Noiga, and the selflessness, that's Kedusha. And the whole Chidush of Yiddishkeit is Kedusha, selflessness. And only a Yid could reach this true level of selflessness. And we'll see how it plays itself out in interpersonal relationships. So let's first start with the beginning, what says first in the Parsha, where there's in this week's Parsha, there's something called a Noah. And there's a Noah in relation to Mekach Memke, business, and there's a Noah is Dvarim. That you're not allowed to hurt somebody with words. So the Parsha first says about a Noah in business, and then later on, it says about Einoas Dvorim. In Pasuk Yudalid of Kapitel Chafei, it says, Al Toinu Ishes Achiv. That means you're not allowed to say words that are deceitful, that are not straight, that are not honest. Do not victimize one another. And it's talking about Zu Einoas Momin, as Rashi says, this is victimization in financial matters. Okay. You have to be straight, you have to be honest, not to cheat someone else, etc. The words that you speak when it comes to dealings, willings, and dealings, it has to be straightforward and honest. I don't want to get into all the details now because it would take too much time and the time is running out. We have a very short Friday. Now, a few psukim later, in Pasuk Yud Zayin, it says, "V'leisoinu ishes hamisoi v'yereisem alikecho." And over here we learn out, Einoas Dvorim. Rashi says, Kan Hizra Einoas Dvorim. Over here, the Torah warns us about verbal harassment. Shal yaknet es chaverei. One should not annoy his fellow. V'leisienu eitza. Nor give him advice. She'ena against that is not appropriate for him. L'fi darkoi v'anosoi shal yoyetz. In other words, sometimes something can be for benefit for you, and therefore you're not so honest with the other person. You're giving him advice that works out for you, necessarily, but not for the other person. And that's a noise dvara, but a noise dvara means also, let's say, a person who's a Baal Tshuva, and you tell him, I remember the days when you were a party animal, etc., etc. So when you hurt somebody with words, that's called a noise dvara. And over here, by the way, we have immediately the connection to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, because there's a Gemara in Bav Metzia, Daf Nun Ches Amud Beis, following the Mishnah actually says, what Rashi brought, and I mentioned before, the Mishnah says, Kishem sheino b'mekach or memker, just like there's something like hurting somebody, being deceitful, when it comes to business, through words, kach eino b'dvarim, so too, there's hurting somebody with words. And the Gemara says, Omer Reb Yochanan mishom Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Reb Yochanan said in the name of Reb Shimon ben Yochai, Godel Einoas Dvorim Einoas Momin. It's worse when you hurt somebody with words than when you cheated him through words or gave him bad advice in words. Bad advice in business. When it comes to Einoas Dvorim, it says, be scared of Hashem. But when it comes to Mekach Memke, it doesn't say you should fear the Eibishter. So Pashtup Pshat, and by the way, there's many times in the Torah where it says and Rashi brings it down over here also later concerning Ribis, as we'll soon see. So the Gemara itself, in the words, when they quoted from Shimon ben Yochai, it's just the fact that Shimon ben Yochai said that by Einoas Dvorim it says, you should fear the Eibishter. So the mere fact that it says those words shows that it's more severe, it's more harsh, it's more serious. Therefore we say, be scared of Hashem. But obviously, because, I would think, let's say, on one hand, when it comes to business, actually stealing something or cheating, it's more black and white, and it's more clear that a person, when he would do that, would know that he's doing it. But even speaking for myself, and I've mentioned this already before, I'm a mashpia, I teach students, and there's a very fine line between trying to point out something that you see, which is, and this is my job, I'm an educator, and you meant to do it out of love, of course, but sometimes you have to point out a problem. So I always have to measure. Some students are more thick-skinned, some students are more thin-skinned, and you have to be so super sensitive. And I fail. Every once in a while, I might end up hurting somebody, and I always have to tell myself, be more careful. You still didn't learn your lesson. After so many years of being in this business, so to speak, in this field, I still make a mistake. and I'm not cautious enough. Hizoru b'divreichem. Be very careful in your words. And why? Because there's einoas dvarim. It's so easy to slip into einoas dvarim, even if you don't mean to be malicious, even if you didn't mean to be harmful. I feel like saying, you know me, you know my style. You know that I make jokes. You know that but you know what? Some people are super sensitive. Sometimes you have to, maybe it would be better in general to be super cautious with everybody. Today everyone's fragile. So we see that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said that einoas dvarim is worse, more severe, more strict, because it says v'yireisim alikecha. And then right after that, the Gemara says, what's the reason for it? So it says v'Rebbe Eliezer omer zeh begufay, that when it comes to einoas dvarim, you harm the person in his body. V'zeh b'mamoney, and over here it's just his money. What's worse, when you hurt somebody personally, or when it's just money? And then it says, Shmuel ben Achmeni Amar, Zeh nitn li shavin v'zeh lo nitn li shavin. This is something you can fix up and this not. I imagine if you cause somebody monetary damages, you could restore it. But when it comes to humiliating a person and hurting him necessarily, then in a way you can never restore that pain. And right after that, the Gemara says, Kol ha'malbim p'nei chaveri berabim, kilu sheifech domei. Whoever humiliates a person in public, it's as if he committed murder, he spilled blood. So, even though it's not necessarily these two things together, because sometimes there could be einoas dvarim and it was private, it wasn't malbim p'nei chaveri, but it's connected. Now, what's important, and why this is so important, again, I'm speaking from my own experience, and therefore I know you have to be careful about it. But the truth is, there is what to say. You know, there's the famous saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. So, on the one hand, this generation, we have to say that because too many people are always, I'm so offended right now, I'm so offended. Don't be so offended, what's the big deal? Somebody said something to you. So I'm just being very careful that that's what you're meant to tell yourself. You should tell yourself to build up resilience, to build up some grit. Somebody's going to criticize you. Somebody might tell you something that might hurt. So what? Tell yourself, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Fine. But then there's the other side of the coin, and I'm going to use the quote in relation to myself, but this is how you should think when you're dealing with others. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may just kill me. Or sticks and stones may break my bone. Sticks and stones may harm me temporarily, but words will scar me for life. And hopefully, you're not saying in relation to yourself, but that's how you should feel when you're talking to somebody else. If you just give them a patch, sometimes you just give a person a light patch, it goes away. But if you told them some words, it sometimes can be like you stabbed them through the heart. It was painful. And so painful you can't even imagine. I don't know if you ever lived through these things. I have, so I can tell you. Some people that are in the more you're a mashpia, sometimes you're a target. People say things. I'm just saying, sometimes somebody could say something to you, and especially if it's in public, and it feels like, wow. I'm saying really, really deep pain, etc., etc. So therefore, this point is very important. Exactly like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, that einoas dvarim is worse than einoas mammon. And that's what it means, that words can scar you. That's what the Gemara says, malbim b'nei chaveri is like sheifch damim. Because taka, that's how careful you have to be when it comes to speaking to another person, and be super careful not to offend him. So that's concerning einoas dvarim. Now later on in the Parsha, it speaks about ribbis. In this week's Parsha, we have the lav that you're not allowed to take interest. Now, what's amazing about interest, the pasuk says you're not allowed to take sarbis Also, v'yireisem me'elekecha, and it says, l'chei achicha imach. Now, why does ribbis, what is special about ribbis? And why, in a way, this mitzvah, in a way, is the epitome of Avos Yisrael? And the answer is, because it makes no sense. Think of it for a second. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning about Chassidus. But in general, Judaism, and this is so important that we have to tell this to ourselves again and again and again. When we speak about Jewish morals and ethics, and right now the entire world has gone insane, anti-Israel, Hashem Yirachim, anti-Semites, they don't begin to understand that the Jewish definition and the nature of Jewish generosity and selflessness doesn't exist in any other culture. Nothing comes even close. Because it doesn't make sense. And therefore the Eibishter, who commanded us, Kedeshim Tiyu, and he gave us mitzvahs that are on a whole different level. You can't even call it menschlichkeit, as we spoke before. What's ribbis? Ribbis means that if I have money, and you ask to borrow this money, I'm meant to give it to you, and I should not get no interest on that money. And that means that I lose. What's the sense of that? In other words, like this. The reason why it makes no sense is when it comes to charity, somebody is destitute, someone's poor, and you have to help out that person. Fine. So we were saying straight up, there's something called charity. You're giving it away to the other person. No problem. That makes sense. He doesn't have, you're giving him. But what's interest? Interest means that if I have 5 stores called Shmel's Essen Bench, now I want to open up a 6th branch in 5 towns. A gamach, a loan, is even for rich people. But since I'm a billionaire and he's only a millionaire, he decides he's going to come to me and ask me to give him money to be able to open up a 6th branch. But wait, there's more. He's willing to pay interest. But he doesn't want to pay the interest that he would get from a bank, which is a very high interest. He wants to go to you, since you're his friend, you know each other from the community, and they're both mutual agreement, you'll give him a loan, which will be half of the interest. Half of the, whatever you call it, interest rates that the bank will give you. Mabaya, what's the problem? You both agree. You're both best friends. The answer is because the real union of Avos Yisrael means that he is more important than you. And that's what's going on over here. You are rich and he is rich, but you're richer. And that money, if it would be by you, you would gain something from it. You're a chaverman, you're a good businessman. You would take this money and put it somewhere in an investment, and there would be interest, and you would gain from it. Now you're meant to take that money, give it to that person, and every minute when it's by that person, you're losing from it. Because you would have made interest from that money, and now you're giving it away to another person. Because it's a favor. He asked you for that. So it's a question of not something that he needs because it's essential. It's a question of whether he should make money on your money or you should make money on your money. And we say, no, he makes money on your money and not you. And that's the ultimate extreme example of selflessness. In other words, there could be 3 approaches to life in general, how you deal with a person. One approach is, I'm first. That's selfish. Me first. I'm number 1. Second approach, we're equals. Third approach, he's more important. And this is what we had recently, a tremendous Hayom Yom. Yesterday's Hayom Yom, the Hayom Yom of Tes Vov Ir, which said in the days of the Alter Rebbe, the Chassidim used to say, this piece of bread that I have is a dainer wie mine. It's as much yours as it is mine. And they would say, yours, dainer wie mine. They said first, it's as much yours as it is mine. So that means that the other person is more important. Selflessness. Wow. And over here, we come to the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. As usual, the Alter Rebbe takes everything to the next level. he says something so astonishing, so amazing. Now it's not within the scope of today's shir to really get into it, but it's in Geras HaKodesh 16, Tez Zayin. And he speaks about the idea of giving charity. And he speaks about the idea that we have to have mercy on the poor people. In that case, we're talking about people that are poor. But I want to bring out a point that he says over here, Loshen. And he says, if we're not going to have mercy on those people, who will? And it says, and they translate over here in the English Tanya, i.e., one should share with his brethren even that which is most essential for one's own life. These are words from this week's Parsha over here when it comes to ribbis, and the way the meaning is over here, just like you have to live and you need essentials, that means to teach us that even the essentials we have to share with someone else. And then he says like this, listen to this. He says 2 points. When do we say that you come first? If there's a certain measurement of water, that's only enough for one of you. And then he says, but in a case that person needs the bare necessities, that person needs what's basic, but you have then of course you have to give away from whatever's extra for that person. You come first only if it's a matter of life and death. For your life, that you don't have the basics. But then, because it's not a question of your life. But then he goes further, and he says something unbelievable. That's only if you're following strictly the letter of the law. Don't be so by the book straight line, which says, and we say that you come first. Rather, you should impose austerity on his own life and go far beyond the demands of the letter of the law. So we don't only say you should do lifnim mishur adin, but lifnai v'lifnim double. Go far beyond. It's going beyond the letter of the law, and it's going far beyond the letter of the law. I.e., that guy comes first. How does it all fit with halacha? We'll leave that for another shir. But look at Chassidus, look at the Alter Rebbe. Unbelievable. And this is the connection to Parshas Shavua. We'll just speak quickly, again, because you have to remember this rule. There's selfish, you come first. Self, equal. Selfless, he comes first. And in the Mishnah in Perek Daled of Ovis, twice we have the same message. And also Chassidus, as usual, sheds light on this concept like nobody else. There's the fourth Mishnah in Perek Daled, which says, be very, very humble. So ma'oid is one time exceedingly. Ma'oid is double exceedingly. Wow. So when it comes to humility, in most cases, in most attributes, we say there's one extreme, go the middle path. Over here we say ma'oid avashal ruach. So not selfish, of course, not even self, but selfless. Try to be exceedingly humble. The more you're honing your selflessness, the better it is. I don't have time to go into this. What about positive self-esteem? What about somebody taking advantage of you? Speak to your local mashpia. Speak to your local rav. All I can tell you is what it says right over here. If you have a question what it means, speak to your local spiritual guidance counselor. But this is what the Mishnah says over here, which means transcendence. Try to be exceeding the transcendence, which means go out of your own pettiness, your own small-mindedness, and reach transcendence, selflessness. And the same thing is in Mishnah Yud, Reb Meir Omer, Hamamayit Beisik Vasek B'Teira, V'Avashval Ruach V'Vnei Kol Adam. Be humble before every person. That means every person bar none. And over here, my friends, there's chapter 30 in Tanya, which I cannot tell you how many mashpiyim and the Rabbi used to talk much about Perek Lev and Tanya, chapter 32 of the Tanya, which is unbelievable and incomparable to everything else. But the truth is that chapter 30, I think, is not emphasized enough. On a personal level, I could tell you, for me personally, chapter 30, Perek Lamed and Tanya, hit its mark. And it's a life changer. And it's a difficult thing. Again, one of these things you struggle with, like I know is Dvarim, is humility. Humility is a difficult trait to acquire, to work on. It's a lifetime job. It's a lifetime work. And chapter Lamed, Perek 30 of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe takes you through the steps, 1, 2, 3. How the meditation, you can have to actually achieve this. Because it's very difficult to understand. And that's what he says right away in the beginning of the chapter. How can you reach that truthfully? And he says how, and he shows us how. And you have to drill this into your head. Step 1, which is you can never judge another person because you're not in his situation. So therefore you have to be humbled. B'fnei kol adam, no matter who he is. Because his circumstances could have caused that person to do that. Number 2, if you want to say, fails in some of his struggles, guess what? You failed in your struggle. And it could be that when it came to his hardest struggle, he didn't fail, which meant he wanted to smoke 20 cigarettes on Shabbos, but only smoked 19, and he didn't smoke the 20th because he knows it's Shabbos, and he decided 19, okay, but I'm not going to do the 20th. But when it came to your struggle, whether to look inside the Siddur during Chazoros HaShatz or not, you failed. That's the second thing the Alter Rebbe brings out. And then finally the Alter Rebbe says, if you know more than him and you studied more than him, then your mistakes are considered intentional wrongdoings, and you're judged more harshly. But him, because he's more of an ignoramus and wasn't educated, knows less, or appreciates less, so therefore he's not judged so harshly. So the Alter Rebbe takes you through these steps, you meditate upon it, and there's no way that you're going to feel yourself greater or superior to anybody else. And this is one of the basics of Yiddishkeit, because it's how you look at yourself, and it'll change how you deal with everybody, and in relation to Hashem also. And it'll always demand that you should work hard on yourself and not be complacent. And it's also a statement against organized religion, because you can't look on the outside at somebody and see where he's holding and say he's lower. Guess what? You could be the rabbi, you could be the spiritual leader. You have to be humble if they call them in front of everybody. And as the Alter Rebbe explains, and that's going to make you a better person. And i.e., it's all in the direction of not selfish, not self, but selflessness. And that's one of the greatest liberating thing. It's not that you end up feeling oppressed or constricted. On the contrary, you're liberated. You're liberated because you have a healthy attitude towards others. You understand no one's perfect, and etc., etc. The Eibusher should help that every single one of us should work on the things that we spoke about today. And basically, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai represents the idea of the ultimate selflessness, and his whole purpose was to bring the world to a better place. Yochanan lifted his kol elam kulim min adin. He brought light and goodness and illumination to the entire world. Through the Zohar. Zohar means illumination. He elevated the whole world, and through Pnimius HaTorah will bring Mashiach. And through Pnimius HaTorah, which is the source, so to speak, of Chassidus, Pnimius HaTorah showed us the Pnimius, the inside story, and how Avos Yisrael is achievable. And everything that Torah speaks about, we take it to the next level. As Reb Shimon Bar Yochai brought out, that a noise dvarim is worse, like he says in the Gemara, is worse than a noise mammon, being sensitive to another person's feelings, and to be more careful. So the Eibusher should help that the schus of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who said Yochanan lifted his kol elam kulim edin, we should see gal einai v'abita neflois miterasecha ki meitzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim arer neflois. In the schus of Reb Shimon, we should see and experience and live to the geula mitzvah shlema, take it from a yad mamish. posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.